I've read over 30 Japanese books. Some were good, some were bad, and some were truly unforgettable. Today I'm sharing my top 5 favorites, the ones that stood out the most. I will tell you why I chose them, what makes them special, and also the Japanese level of each book so that you will know whether they are right for you or not. Plus, I will share some Japanese words and phrases that I have learned from each book. So let's dive in, starting with number 5. And the 5th place is this book, which is called Ao no Hono, which can be translated as Blue Flame. It was written by Yusuke Kishi and published in 1999. So this is a mystery thriller novel, but unlike traditional mystery novels where you have a detective trying to solve a crime, for example, this is actually the opposite. We already know from the start who committed the crime. The protagonist, Shuichi, is a high school student who is forced to live with his mother's abusive ex-husband, Ryuji. Shuichi is feeling trapped and desperate to protect his family, so he carefully designs or plans the murder of Ryuji, in which he calls a Kanzen Hanzai, which translates to a perfect crime, as he tried to make it look like a natural death. So instead of following a detective trying to solve a crime, we experience the story from the view of the murderer himself. So we can dive deep into his emotions, his logic, and how he feels about what he had done. The reason this book made into the top 5 is because of the change, because of the shift in perspective, or the shift of emotions that it brings to us while reading the novel. When we start reading, instead of rooting for the detective, we actually try to understand or sympathize with Shuichi's intentions and all the desperation that he was going through. But as the story unfolds, we start to question his morality more and more. As I said, at first I sympathize with him actually, but then he starts to get more and more condescending, and by the middle to the end of the story I start to actually hope that he will get caught. So I had all this mix of emotions while reading this novel. I also watched the 2003 movie adaptation, and I really recommend that you don't. Because it was really terrible and actually made me question the book itself, like, was it really that bad? Basically, read the book, but skip the movie. Now, regarding the Japanese level for the book, this book and all the books in this list are not for beginners. They are aimed at adults, and so it has limited furigana on the kanji, for example, or it also uses grammar that can feel a little bit obscure and not used so much in casual speech, for example. That being said, Kishi's writing is not overly complicated, so I think that intermediate learners can give it a try, especially if you use a dictionary. In my case, as I said, I used a Kindle for that, and by using a Kindle I could readily search for any word that I didn't understand, and it made the experience, it made reading the novel much easier. So if you want to give this book a try, I'd recommend the digital version, of course. Now, if I were to say some Japanese that I learned from this book, one word that really stuck with me, even though I read this book a few years ago during the pandemic, if I remember correctly, was the word ranguiba, which refers to very, very uneven teeth. It's not really a word used in daily conversation. In daily conversation, people usually use expressions like hanarabi. Hanarabi ga ii for good teeth alignment, and hanarabi ga warui for bad teeth alignment. But in the book, Shuichi uses ranguiba to describe Ryuji, and by using this very specific word, it made me much easier to imagine this character Ryuji in my mind, and I think that's why I never ever forgot this word, even though I haven't seen it that much after reading this book. I think I saw it in other novels after this, but I never heard it outside of this context, outside of books in real life. So the fourth place is this book, Norue no Mori, which translates to Norwegian Wood and was written by Haruki Murakami and published in 1987. It's a romance novel, kind of drama-like novel, but it's not really just about love, it's about nostalgia and also reflecting on your own past. It was originally published as two books like this. The first one is the Jokan, followed by the Gekan, which is a common practice when it comes to Japanese novels. This is one of the best-selling novels in Japan, if not the most sold ever, with over 10 million copies. So in this book, the protagonist, Toru Watanabe, looks back on his youth, his college days in 1960s Tokyo. It's a story of nostalgia, loss, relationships, especially his relationships with two women from his past. So the way that Murakami-san writes makes you feel right you were there. I felt like I was experiencing Tokyo in the 1960s through Toru's lens. And the reason that this book made into the top 5, fourth place, was because it was a turning point, in part because it was a turning point in my Japanese reading journey. I read it around 2014 or 2015, and for the first time I felt completely connected to the Japanese language as I read, rather than feeling stressed about it. Murakami's writing is really dense, but he's really skilled at the craft of writing, obviously. So his writing is very vivid, and his sentence created very clear images in my head, and I think that takes a lot of skill. The nostalgia of the books also hits very deep. At least for me, nostalgia is one of those, like one of the most deep feelings that we can feel, and even though I'm not Toru, I could feel his loss, and I could clearly imagine his life back in the 60s. I actually had sold the books and I bought them again because I plan on reading them again, and it's the first time that I'm ever rereading a novel, be it in Japanese or any other language, because I want to see how I feel 10 years after reading it the first time. Now, as for the Japanese level of this book, surprisingly, the language is very straightforward, and so I think that it's accessible even to intermediate learners. If you're learning Japanese, this could be a first novel that you could try, especially because it's not overly complex. But even if you don't read Japanese, that's also fine, because this book has been translated into many languages under the title of Norwegian Wood. Now, some Japanese that I learned from it, as I said, I read this 10 years ago, but a word that I never forgot, a word or an expression that I never forgot, was hinshiku o kao, which means to be frowned at. For example, if you play drums at midnight, your neighbors obviously will not love you. You'll be buying their frown. What struck me here was realizing that kao is not only used to buying things. It can also mean receiving or summoning the consequences of something bad you did. The third place is Byakuyako, which translates to Journey Under the Midnight Sun in English. It was written by Keigo Higashino, Japan's most famous mystery author, and published in 1999. It's a mystery novel, but what makes it truly unique is that it spans a 20 years investigation, making it really dense. So to summarize it without spoilers, basically a man is murdered in Osaka and the woman who is the main suspect of the crime dies soon after. The detective then turns his focus to two people, Yukiho, the suspect's daughter, and Ryoji, the son of the murdered man. Over the next 20 years, he follows their lives trying to find evidence that connects both of them to the crime. So the novel is really massive, it's like over 800 pages, and it's filled with interwoven characters and events, making it a very deep and dense reading. So the reason I placed this book at third place is because I really liked how Nothing is really directed, told to us, the reader. We have to gather the hints and think by ourselves. It's up to us to connect the dots. I got this book in 2013, but it felt so intimidating at first that I just kept it on my shelf and didn't read it until the pandemic around 2020. It's also available in English, as I said, with the title Journey Under the Midnight Sun, so you can also experience the story even if you don't know enough or if you're not learning Japanese. As for the level of Japanese, as you're probably thinking, this is really a book for advanced learners because the writing is really dense. There's also other dialects, like I said, Osaka dialect in there, which make it quite tricky. If you're still learning, I would suggest that you wait until you're a little bit more comfortable with Japanese novels before tackling this one. Now, as for the Japanese that I learned from this novel, unfortunately I don't have a copy of the book here with me anymore, but we can talk about the Japanese title. The Japanese title, Byakuyaku, is fascinating in my opinion. So Byakuya refers to the midnight sun, that phenomenon that occurs on the polar regions when the sun never sets in summer. And Yako means being active at night, and it's used in words like Yako dobutsu, which means nocturnal animals, or Yakobasu, which means a night bus, like the kind of bus that goes from Tokyo to Osaka, for example. So Higashino-san fused these two words together to make this word Byakuyako, and it symbolizes how the protagonists spend all their lives hidden in the shadows. They can never walk under the normal sun, only under the midnight sun. Now the second place book is this one, Rokunin no Usotsuki na Daigakusei, which translates to 6 lying university students. It was written by Akinari Asakura and published in 2021. It's a mystery novel, but unlike the others on the list, it's not about murder, but rather about a game of deception. So the story revolves around 6 university students, obviously, and they are competing for a job at a prestigious company. At first, they work together in a friendly group discussion, hoping that all of them will get admitted into the company and that group discussion is just a formality. But then there is a shift on topic, and they have to discuss choose among you only one of you to be hired. And then things take a turn when a mysterious envelope appears somewhere in the room. And when they open the envelope one by one, they find out that each envelope contains some dark secrets from the past of each of these students. And there comes the first mystery of the novel, like who placed that envelope there and why. And then as the story unfolds, more and more mysteries emerge. I just couldn't stop reading after I started. Indeed, I think I read this book in like 3 or 4 days. And that's one of the reasons why this book made it into the second place, because I loved how Akinari Asakura structured his story. He introduced a lot of mysteries, but he was careful to answer all of them, leaving us satisfied at the end. He really answered every single question that I had. It's packed with plot twists. By the way, plot twists in Japanese is called dondengaeshi, and this book is full of dondengaeshi. It's only 300 pages, which is one of the reasons why I could read it so fast, but honestly, I really wanted it to be longer. And also, it gives you insight into Japanese very unique job hunting culture. This group discussion format is actually a real part of the hiring process in Japan, which makes the story even more realistic. As for the Japanese level of this book, despite being a short novel, it's definitely it's definitely for advanced learners, because it has a lot of obscure words, and I was glad that I was reading it on a Kindle, because I had to check words every page, almost every page. It really humbled me actually, because I wasn't really expecting to, at this stage, struggle so much with the vocabulary found in a novel. So if you are going to give it a try, because it's really, really good. There's also a movie, but I haven't watched that yet. I'm not sure if I will ever watch it. Anyway, after the Aonohono trauma. But if you give it a try, definitely get it on Kindle. Now, one Japanese word that, among the many that I learned that stuck with me, is one that I even use nowadays when I have the chance to, which is this one, kiyu. This word kiyu means a useless worry. We usually use shinpai for worry, but kiyu adds a layer of nuance because it refers to unnecessary worries. For example, if you board a plane and you are afraid, worried that it might crash, that's a kiyu, because the chance of that happening is extremely low. 飛行機怖いな、墜落したらどうしよう。それ急だよ。それよりは旅行を楽しんで。And now we are ready for the first place. The best Japanese novel that I have ever read is this one, Kurai no Tsubo, which refers to the Kleins bottle in mathematics. It was written by Futari Okajima, which is a pen name shared by two mystery authors, Izumi Inoue and Junichi Tokuyama. It was published in 1989 and it was their final book and considered their masterpiece. It's a thriller with hints of science fiction, blending virtual reality with mystery. So to summarize it briefly, Akihiko Uesugi, which is a college student and who also likes to write, he sells his story for a game to this company, which is going to develop a game called Brain Syndrome, based on the story that Akihiko wrote, and develop the game to be played on this completely revolutionary virtual reality system, which they call Klein Ni, or the Klein 2. So the system, the Klein Ni, is a fully immersive virtual reality, making it feel very hard to differentiate it from real life. And then Akihiko, the writer of the original story for the game, is invited to be a tester for the game to find bugs and stuff, or to see if the story is progressing the way that he envisioned, along with another woman which is called Risa Takaishi, and they start to get along with each other, but soon things take a dark turn when Lisa suddenly disappears. So together with Lisa's friend Nanami Makabe, who is also worried about Lisa, Akihiko investigates the company behind Klein 2, and what they uncover is beyond imagination. The reason that I chose this as my favorite novel and that really blew my mind was how the authors perfectly blurred the line between what is reality and what was the virtual reality, what was the game and what was real life. Even me as a reader, I started questioning what was real in that book. It reminded me of Inception, which is also one of my favorite movies, and I think this book could have easily been an inspiration for it. It's over 400 pages, but believe me, once you start reading, you will not be able to stop. Now, as for the Japanese level of the book, actually the language itself is quite gentle. Even some common words have furigana on them sometimes, and I cannot find any example here right now, but this makes it very accessible for intermediate learners. If you're looking for a Japanese novel that is very immersive, but at the same time is not super incredibly hard, this could be your choice. You will not regret it. Oh, and I got a physical copy because I really love the book and I want it on my shelf, but I actually read it on Kindle as well. So if you want, you can get the digital version. Now, as for some Japanese that I learned from this book, well, the title itself is interesting. So Klein no Tsubu refers to the Klein bottle, which is a concept that I will not even try to explain because I don't I'm not a mathematician and I don't really get it. And the kanji here, tsubo, even though it's not the Joyo kanji, the list of the most common kanji that kids learn in school, it is still pretty common. An expression that I really like that uses tsubo is the expression omotsubo. Omotsubo means as planned. Maybe it's easier with an example. So for example, in chess, if your opponent leads you to make moves that will benefit them, that means that you have fallen into their omotsubo. So these are my top 5 Japanese books, Japanese novels so far. Now let me know in the comments which novel are you most excited to read, and if you have great recommendations of novels, let me know as well. I'm always looking for something to read. Now before you go, check out this other video because it will help you break down longer sentences, making these books that are introduced to you much easier to read. And thanks for watching and see you in the next video. Mata ne!